Taking the time to work with our colleagues to make sure we develop a curriculum that is evidence-based, aligned with our regulatory and Board of Nursing standards, and third of all, to make sure our students are ready for NCLEX and then ready for nursing practice can feel overwhelming on most days. But there are three key steps that we're going to talk about in this snapshot to help you stay focused on exactly what we should prioritize when we're thinking about our curriculum. And we're going to talk through the question of what exactly is curriculum. You wouldn't believe how many times we get that question from our nurse educator colleagues. Welcome, everybody, to this snapshot. If this is the first time you're joining us, we're delighted that you have found us. There is a directory that you can kind of streamline your process, I would say, if you're on the journey to achieve C&E. And if you're just showing up to become a better nurse educator, then that's great as well. But the directory helps everybody. So I hope that you will take some time to take a look at that. The other exciting news that I do want to share is that we now have a playlist that is categorized with some of our most popular content areas. So if you want to take advantage of that playlist, it's really an introduction to all of the competencies for C&E. And then you can take a look for those on the journey to C&E clinical or C&E novice. This is a great resource for you as well. And if you're returning, welcome back. We're delighted that you're here. All right, so get ready because there's lots of details that we're going to start out just talking about as we kind of warm up for this snapshot today. So first and foremost, I want you to pull out your resources. Yes, this is a time for you to engage in content that is going to help you close your knowledge gap. So that's first step. I want you to pull out your webinar snapshot study worksheet. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. That is located right here in the description as well if you don't have that handy in front of you. We're also going to take a look at the handbook, but before we do that, we're going to go to our worksheet. Okay, so this is what I want you to do. Every single time when you show up for a snapshot, I want you to print out this worksheet. I realize that so many of you are multitasking because that's the world we live in. So you may be listening to us as you're on your way to work, or maybe you are cleaning. We hear that feedback too. So you may not have a chance to print out the study worksheet. Okay, so this is what I want you to do. I want you to print it out once you have a chance to complete your task or complete your commute today. Okay, so whatever date you're watching this snapshot, I want you to go ahead and write down today's date. And the reason why is because research tells us that we're up to 70% more likely to retain information first and foremost, and second of all, to commit to whatever outcome, whatever objective we have in mind when we actually write it down. And when we tell somebody, so there's that accountability, that's an even higher level. So we're even more likely to achieve our objective. So today's date and then the objective. What is it that you want to walk away after today's snapshot having a better understanding about? Is there a muddy gap that you already have related to curriculum? I want you to write down that objective, okay? Because this is the time for you to focus on how is it that I am going to elevate my ability to demonstrate nurse educator competencies that are outlined by NLN. If you're on the journey to C&E, this is really important for you because we're going to talk about exactly where this content aligns with each of the competencies and the blueprint that will help you stay focused on your 7-week study plan. Okay, that is always our recommendation, is that you carve out time from your schedule to focus on the content areas that you are unclear about, or maybe you're just not sure exactly what's going to be on the exam. Okay, so these snapshots will give you a great introduction and better understanding that information. The next section we want you to focus on with your study worksheet is the competency that is discussed. Okay, so let's go ahead and flip over to our handbook. We went ahead and went to the NLN website. So let me show you where you can find that if you haven't been there already. This is where you can actually find the NLN information related to the handbook and information about each of the competencies to help you close your knowledge gap. All right, and then what I would say as I'm pulling that up for you is when you are going through your self-assessment, because that's the first step, we have what we call a success blueprint, and it's really a model that we have developed. Well, that success model outlines 3 different areas that you will focus on as you move forward on your journey. Okay, so this is one of the areas, having a real clear knowledge about where your gaps are today. So you complete a self-assessment so you're clear about exactly what those gaps are. Okay, so for purposes of our snapshot, we want you to go through competency 4 for the C&E. This gives you about 8 different areas that you're going to focus on to help you close your knowledge gaps. Actually, I guess there's 10. So there's 10 what we call sub-competencies or behaviors associated with curriculum design for the C&E. So the 10 is equated to each of these alphabets. So you can see A through K. So I think that equates to 10. All right, so what we want you to do is focus on the content we're going to talk about today. But again, competency 4 for C&E is what the content is aligned with today. And for C&E novice, it's also competency 4. And then for clinical, yes, it includes content for you all as well if you're on the C&E clinical journey. 15% of the questions are aligned with competency 1, functioning with the education and healthcare environments. And look what happens under competency 1. You have a B that says operationalize the curriculum. This is where we're able to fully engage and align didactic content with the clinical experiences that our students are going to have. So there are 9 behaviors that are associated with operationalizing the curriculum for the C&E clinical. All right, so this is where you are going to print out the handbook that is relevant for you so that you can make sure you close your knowledge gaps, okay? Before we go to the NLN website, a couple other points I want to make is going to be resources, key takeaways. So as you are listening to content today, that's what we want you to write down. What are the key takeaways that you are walking away with so that you can close your knowledge gaps and identify what your 7-week study plan is? Now, it may be that you're already clear about what your 7-week study plan, meaning that you know exactly how many hours you're going to spend focusing on competency 1 as an example under week 1. If you have our study workbook, I want you to go ahead and turn in your workbook to page 44. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing for a second. So page 44 in your study workbook, if you have that, this is where you're going to see part 4, which is focusing on curriculum. This section gives you a lot of content about curriculum, and it also includes a thought-provoking question, as well as what we call our infographic, our learning guide about key elements that you want to consider related to curriculum. Okay, so our workbook is designed to help you expedite your process on the C&E journey. Stay focused so you are not studying content that is irrelevant and really is not important for you to know as it relates to the C&E exam. Now, there's content that we're going to be talking about today that if you're not on the journey, it's highly recommended that you focus on or take a deeper dive into this content. But if you are on the journey, we want you to have a very concise plan. This is what helps you feel like you're moving forward with ease and you're making progress on your C&E journey. All right, so resources. We've already talked about the workbook. We've talked about the worksheet. The next resource we're going to point out is going to be the website. That's where we're going to go next. So nln.org is the website you're going to go to. If you haven't already printed out these handbooks, this is where you're going to locate them. So you're going to go to NLN certification at the top, and then on the left-hand side, you're going to see the respective C&E exam that you are preparing for. So let's assume that you're preparing for the C&E clinical. You will click on C&E clinical, and then the website will open up to show you exact specifics related to C&E clinical. Sometimes it takes a little bit. So you will see in the middle of the page, you can click on Academic Clinical Nurse Educator Candidate Handbook. That is the same resource that we were looking at when we were going over the blueprint. So each of the exams has their own blueprint. This is what you're going to print out. You're actually going to print out the entire handbook. We want you to read it cover to cover. I know it's good nighttime reading. And there's between 35 and 45 pages, depending on which handbook you print out. Okay, so that is going to be your roadmap as we support you on your journey. The other resource I want you to make sure you have in front of you is going to be Billings and Halstead. Okay, so we still recommend the 6th edition because that is the textbook that NLN shared with us during the last summit that they used to align the exam questions. Okay, Now, the 7th edition, if you do have that already, I know it looks so nice, it's the 25th anniversary edition. I mean, you're going to start on page 128. Okay, so if you have the 7th edition, you're going to start on page 128 to help you close your knowledge gaps and then take a deeper dive and looking at content for the C&E exam. And then for the 6th edition, it is page 107. All right, and these are really introductory areas in the textbooks that will help you kind of have a good overview of what a curriculum is, which we're going to do an intro during our time together today. And then this last resource is for those that have already completed their C&E journey, or you're not interested in the C&E and you just want to become a better nurse educator. Dr. Orman is one of my favorite authors when it comes to all things assessment and evaluation. Chapter 3 on page 19 in her book, A Systematic Approach to Assessment and Evaluation of Nursing Programs, is an excellent book because it really does lay out chapter by chapter, not only information about strategies and really philosophy and theory associated with evaluation, but it does such an excellent job of aligning our teaching strategies, even the curricular elements that we're going to introduce today, to ensure that we're always thinking about evaluation as we move through the 3 C's of curriculum that we're going to talk about today. All right, let's see if I have any other resources in front of me that I want to bring to your attention. I think that is plenty, so make sure you have these resources in front of you when you are hopefully after we finish our snapshot today. You're going to take some time to debrief, go through that study worksheet, have your textbook in front of you, have your workbook in front of you, have your handbook in front of you, so that you can have strong alignment between the content that we're talking about today and the actual primary source. The number one reason colleagues are not successful on the C&E exam is because they have not properly prepared for the exam. Now, NLN says because of lack of preparation. We've added proper preparation. There's no other workbook or textbook that you need to take a look at. The only one that we want you to take a look at if you're on a C&E journey is Billings and Halstead, again, preferably the 6th edition. And you can also use as a supplement Dr. Caputi's C&E review book if you have it. It's the Cliff Notes version, but if you don't have it, Billings and Halstead is an excellent resource for you. All right, and if you're watching us live, go ahead and put in the chat any questions that you have about any of the content that we've talked about so far. All right, and then what I want you to do is, as you're writing down today's date, I want you to think about this question. When you reflect on the revisions that you've done the previous year, okay, I know everybody's on a little bit different schedule, but think about the curricular revisions you did last year, however you define that. Think about what those top 3 priorities were. Okay, so go ahead and write that down on your study worksheet. This is relevant. All right, so write down, what were those 3 curricular changes that you made last year as a nursing program, maybe even as a university? Okay, in a previous university where I was at, there was a strong focus on competency-based curriculum. And so the nursing program decided that it would raise its hand and be part of that initiative from a university standpoint. Okay, so that was one of the goals, is that we moved to a competency-based curriculum. So that's just one example. It may not be necessarily directly related to a revision decision that you all made within the nursing program. It could be at the university level. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to write down 3 curricular revisions you've made. And that's step 1. Step 2 is we're going through our content today. I want you to think about the impact of those 3 curricular revisions that you made last year or 2 years ago. Okay, whatever that time frame is for you. So let's take a look together and see what you think. And then we will finish up, we'll wrap up our time together like we always do, taking a look at the correct answer to our thought-provoking question, and also just making sure that you all understand exactly why the other 2 choices were not correct. Your nursing school is reviewing its curriculum to ensure it aligns with current healthcare trends. You are working with the curriculum committee to highlight the primary focus areas. According to NLN Nurse Educator Competency, what is the primary focus when selecting content for the nursing curriculum? A, covering historical aspects of nursing to provide a foundation for nursing as a profession. B, emphasizing both clinical and non-clinical aspects of healthcare to broaden the scope of education. Or C, aligning with current healthcare trends and workforce needs to properly prepare students. All right, so 2 steps we want you to follow for every question on the C&E exam. The first one is, what is this question really asking me? Okay, and then the second question or thought we want you to have is, what is it that I know for sure about content that is included in this question? So your question would be, what is it that I know about development of curriculum? Even if you can't remember exactly what the statement is about the competency, you can start thinking about what is our commitment as a nursing program for curricular elements to best support students' safe nursing practices, right? Because that's exactly what this question is asking us about, alignment with current healthcare trends. And means that we are properly developing content in our course that aligns with nursing practice so that our nursing students can make those safe patient care decisions when they graduate at the bedside and even before they graduate, right? We want them making those safe practice decisions during our clinical experiences, during our SIM experiences, during our skills lab experiences as well. All right, so we're going to come back to our thought-provoking question as we wrap up our time together today. Now we're going to transition to Prezi. If you haven't used Prezi before, I encourage you to try out Prezi. It's a great technology that really does engage students in a different type of way. Even though it does take, I will admit, some extra time for you to set it up because it's not quite as simple as PowerPoint, but just like PowerPoint, when we first started using it, and we had to transition away from those overhead projectors and transparencies. I know many of you remember those days. Prezi isn't just another technology, just like PowerPoint. The more we use it, the more familiar we become to help you close your knowledge gaps as it relates to using advanced technology. Okay, so we want you to engage in this practice of Prezi. Okay, so this is our Prezi presentation. This is kind of where it starts. So this is the initial kind of overview that we will be talking about today. But our goal is that you're able to walk away having an understanding of those 3 steps you're going to take. As an intro, remember this is just the beginning of several snapshots that will focus on curriculum. We'll finish out the summer focusing on curriculum to align with our monthly boot camp. Okay, and there's a link to the monthly boot camp right here in the description as well. If you want to take a deeper dive, that's a great way to earn contact hours and to increase your accountability. Remember, we talked about that at the beginning because you have a group of like-minded nurse educator colleagues that will support you on the journey. All right, so we're focusing on tracking excellence. Our goal is that you will be able to enhance your curricular process, your curricular revision process, to really boost and to encourage student faculty success. Well, we know without faculty success, it's really hard for students to be successful. So that's why we focus on alignment and really partnership between our learners and our faculty to ensure that we are moving forward, integrating these evidence-based practices that are going to support our student success in the classroom. And it is a journey, right? It never ends. There are always changes that we need to make to our curriculum, and it doesn't mean we need to make them right away. Sometimes we need to step back, reflect on the feedback or the data that we've received before we make that final decision about what the change will be, all right, which is part of our discussion today. Next, we want to talk about an intro. So taking a look at what are these steps that we want to make sure we're following. Well, first, it is about tracking data. All right, so I want you to go ahead and write down what are 2 sources of data that influence curricular revisions. Okay, so just 2 sources of data that influence curricular revision. All right, ones that come to mind may be how students perform on an exam, right? A formative evaluation or a summative evaluation. We may consider when we look at our blueprint, was there strong alignment with all of the elements that we know are important for an exam blueprint, such as our learning objectives? Did we map the question on the exam to our learning objectives? Second of all, did we map that exam question to the content that we taught in our course. And then starting out, what is curriculum anyway? We want you to think about this question that we started with. How does your nursing program curriculum prepare students for nursing practice? Okay, so you wrote down at the beginning of our time together today 3 revisions to your curriculum that you made the last time, whether that was last year, 2 years ago, or even longer. So now we're taking it a step further. How did those changes prepare your students for nursing practice? So we gather data, right? So we talked about exams or evaluations, whether it's formative or summative, that give us data about whether or not we have aligned, hopefully, our students' learning with achieving those learning outcomes in our nursing program. But we also gather data from our healthcare organizations, hopefully. So this is where we're going to ask the question, who's at the table? What is the curriculum? This is often a question that we hear from nurse educator colleagues. It is a term that actually dates back to the early 1800s, and it was based on work and conversations that happened in Scotland. So the Latin term, which is really the original basis of the word curriculum, is currere, and it was later translated to mean course of study. Okay, and there are 3 C's associated with this work that was done, and it is related to content, continuity, and context. So continuity is the sequence. So it is also known as scaffolding, where students are taking their prior learning experiences and we're balancing those experiences from prior courses with the experiences we want students to have with the next course. We're aligning, we're mapping the sequence of knowledge that happens from course to course, semester to semester. And then there's the element of continuity as well. So we want students to learn over time, right? We want it to be a continuous process of learning. So we want to ensure that, again, it's seamless, that it's aligned, and students understand from one course to the next, what is it that they're going to learn differently in courses in the second semester than in the first semester. And then the context, which is centered around application. We want students to understand the reason for a sterile technique, the reason why we want them to follow certain steps. Yes, it's evidence-based, but we also want to decrease the infection rate, such as during surgical procedures or doing Foley insertion. So we really want students to be able to apply these concepts that we're teaching them about in the didactic setting. That is the premise and really the theory associated with the integration element. So 3 steps when it comes to revamping curriculum. Number 1 is analyzing the current curriculum. So who's at the table, right? Do we have our healthcare colleagues at the table? This is actually a picture of Dr. McMillan Bowler during our annual conference. She was talking about competency-based curriculum. And so we know that there's value in the feedback that our healthcare partners give us about how our graduates are performing once they graduate and they start working within that institution. So we want to gather that data. We want them to have a seat at the table so we can hear firsthand how great our nursing students are doing, right? And that they want to hire more of them and they're interested in learning. How can they do that? When we talk about analysis of existing curriculum, we want to think about it in 3 different buckets. So first of all, we want to invite the right people at the table, whether that's our advisory board or whether we are partnering with the healthcare organization. That's another great strategy. I know for Nurses Week, the advisory board that I'm a part of, we actually worked collaboratively to set up a table within the healthcare institution to give out treats to nurses, alumni primarily, but also any nurse that came by. We wanted them to know that we cared about them, especially during Nurses Week, our alumni. And then we want to evaluate, how do we validate that learning has happened? We talked earlier about Dr. Orman's book. This is just one of the resources, but there are many resources that she has. But when we look at this particular textbook, what we like about it, which is titled A Systematic Approach to Assessment and Evaluation of Nursing Programs, we will also put that in the description so you have access. Again, for those colleagues that are on the journey, this is not a resource we want you to look at. Okay, we want you to stay focused. But colleagues that are not on the journey, this is a textbook that is published by NLN that we would highly recommend. So we want to evaluate whether learning has happened, and we want to be able to map our learning objectives, our learning experiences that we're developing for our students in the classroom with our nursing department with our nursing curriculum outcomes. And then identify. So we're looking to identify what are the opportunities to further explore revisions to our curriculum. What does the evidence say? Are we moving to a competency-based curriculum? So what we want to identify are those evidence-based practices, and what colleagues do we want at the table when it comes to curricular revisions. Often I know that occurs within the curriculum committee, but is there additional help that we may need to move a big project forward, such as move into a competency-based curriculum? Step 2 is prioritize. I know we want to do everything all at once. However, we have to consider what are the changes that are needed and when are they needed. I decided to capture just a screenshot of this article that was titled, These AI Nurse-like Agents Cost $9 per Hour, Threat or Help to Human Nurses. Lots of discussion on social media, even in literature, about the changes that will happen because of AI. Okay, so we want to prioritize what changes do we need to make. We know that this data came from the US Labor of Statistics, looking at the impact of this change. Okay, so what changes do we need to make to our curriculum? And most importantly, how is this going to change nursing? Is there involvement that we need to have from a nursing program level to make sure that we are knowledgeable about the changes that are coming? And second of all, that we're advocating for whatever that right thing to do is. Okay, so going back, I just want to take a second to go back. You can actually embed a video. It actually went faster than I had anticipated. So I just want to go back and just share again. This is data from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics that projects that there will be 203,200 openings for registered nurses each year through 2031. This is due to the need to replace nurses who leave the workforce, such as those that are retiring or transferring to other specialties or other occupations. Okay, so that was just a little data. Like I said, it went kind of fast, but that's the great thing about Prezi. You can always go back and pause it if you want to reinforce a point. Okay, so that's data that you can use, when you're having conversations with your colleagues about what changes need to happen and why those changes should move forward. Next is step number 3, which is incorporating the modern teaching methods. We know that that's just one example, looking at the simulation, right? We know now there's desktop or virtual simulation where our nursing students can really take advantage of a resource that can be quite expensive when we only are able to rely on sim labs. And so this allows our students to have some practice time and get feedback, because there's so many now. There are 10 years ago that wasn't the case. But now there's so many different options when it comes to virtual simulation, and they're really good. I think this is Laerdal. I think you can see the citation. But there's many resources out there that are available to our students. So we, first of all, have to make sure that we're knowledgeable about this resource. So we have to get the proper training. And then second of all, we need to make sure we properly prepare students for these innovative teaching experiences that we develop for them. All right, so that's going to wrap up our content for our time together. And now we're going to take a look at our thought-provoking question. Hopefully you've had a chance to write down what you think the best option is. And as you wrap up using, again, your study worksheet, we want you to write down, hopefully, what your takeaways are. Okay, so hopefully you have that by now, hopefully at least 5. And then at the very bottom are top 3 gap areas. If this was a muddy point for you, curriculum overall, hopefully this has helped to clarify muddy points that you may have already had. If not, what I would recommend is to join us during our monthly boot camp, or just to stay tuned. Go ahead and subscribe to this channel and make sure you click the bell so you'll be notified every single time a new snapshot is launched, which usually happens every week. So for those of you that chose C, aligning with current healthcare trends and workforce needs to properly prepare students, give yourselves a round of applause. That is the correct answer. A was not correct, because it's not just about, when we talk about curriculum, it's not only focusing on historical aspects. That's good. But this question says the primary focus of the curriculum competency, which is alignment with those current healthcare trends and workforce needs. And then B, that sounded good, right? And oftentimes, just like NCLEX, There may be two good answers, but there's only one best answer, only one correct answer. Okay. So when you think about emphasizing, yes, it's clinical and non-clinical, but it's not to broaden the scope of education. It's really to focus on what are the needs of our healthcare workforce? How can we properly or most effectively prepare our nursing students to practice at the highest level, first of all, to choose safe patient care practices, but number two, to be able to perform at the highest level upon graduation. All right, so just as a recap, resources. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Resources I want you to use. Okay, so your study worksheet, number one, filling that out every time we meet. We record a new snapshot every single week. And then the second resource is going to be your candidate handbook. You can see I have notes all over mine. Okay, so that's the blueprint. And then we want you to use the 6th edition of Billings and Halstead, starting on page 107, focusing on curriculum for this snapshot. And then page 128 gives you that introduction to curriculum in the 7th edition. Okay, so we hope that, and the last resource, again, is going to be your study workbook. And then the supplemental for those not on the journey is going to be Dr. Orman's systematic approach to assessment and evaluation of nursing programs, and we will put that in the description as well. Reach out to us if you have any questions, info@drsellerseducate.com, and we look forward to seeing you in our next snapshot. Have a great one, everybody.